Leavitt always had a knack for noticing the little things in life. She wasn't the kind of person who just walked past people without wondering about their stories. As a journalist, she believed that everyone carried something unique within them, something worth sharing with the world. On a chilly autumn morning, she found herself standing outside her old high school, feeling a mix of nostalgia and curiosity. It was an alumni event, and though she hadn't planned to attend at first, something pulled her back to the place where so many memories were made. As she stepped inside, the familiar smell of polished floors and chalk dust hit her instantly. The hallways looked almost the same, except for a fresh coat of paint here and there. But what really caught her eye wasn't the building. It was a man. A tall, slightly stooped figure, pushing a mop down the corridor. His movements were slower than they used to be, but his smile, that was exactly the same. It was Mr. Thompson, the janitor. Leavitt froze for a moment, her mind racing back to her teenage years. He'd been there then too, always quiet but somehow present when you needed him most. She couldn't help but wonder. How long had he been doing this job? Was he still working here after all these years? The thought intrigued her. After grabbing a cup of coffee from the refreshment table, she decided to approach him. "Hi," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. When he turned around, his eyes lit up with recognition. "You look familiar," he said, leaning on his mop handle. "Were you one of Mrs. Peterson's students?" Leavitt laughed. "Yes, I was in her English class. Do you remember me?" Mr. Thompson squinted, playfully, pretending to think hard. You sat near the window, didn't you? Always scribbling in that notebook of yours." Leavitt felt a jolt of surprise. How did he remember that? She hadn't thought anyone noticed those tiny details about her back then. They chatted, for a while, catching up like old friends. Then, unable to hold back her curiosity any longer, she asked, "How long have you been working here, Mr. Thompson?" He paused, tilting his head as if calculating the years. "Let's see. I started in '73, so that would make it, about 47 years now." Leavitt's mouth fell open. 47 years? That meant he'd been cleaning these halls since before she was even born. And yet, here he was, still showing up every day, still taking care of the place like it was his own home. It didn't make sense. Most people would have retired by now, especially at his age. But Mr. Thompson didn't seem like someone who followed the usual rules. The more Leavitt thought about it, the more curious she became. What kept him going? Why did he choose to stay in this job for so long? There was something deeper here, something worth exploring. Little did she know, asking that simple question would lead her on a journey she'd never forget, one that would uncover not only Mr. Thompson's story, but also remind her of the quiet heroes we often overlook in our daily lives. After that brief conversation with Mr. Thompson, Leavitt couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story than met the eye. 47 years of working at the same school? That wasn't just dedication, it was a lifetime. She found herself wondering what drove him to keep coming back day after day, even as the world around him changed so much. Was it love for the job? A sense of duty? Or maybe something else entirely? The next morning, instead of heading straight to her office, Leavitt made a detour to the school library. She figured if anyone knew about the history of the place, it would be hidden in old yearbooks or archived records. The librarian, an elderly woman who had worked there for decades herself, greeted her warmly. "What are you looking for?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. "I'm trying to learn more about one of your longest-serving staff members," Leavitt replied. "Mr. Thompson, the janitor." The librarian's face softened. "Ah, yes, everyone knows him. He's been here longer than most of us." She led Leavitt to a dusty corner filled with shelves of old documents and photo albums. As Leavitt flipped through yellowed pages, she began piecing together fragments of Mr. Thompson's life. There he was in black and white photos from the 1970s, standing beside shiny new lockers during the school's grand renovation. In another picture, He was helping hang decorations for a winter dance. His role might have been behind the scenes, but his presence was undeniable. But the real treasure trove came when Leavitt stumbled upon interviews with former teachers and staff members. One retired principal described Mr. Thompson as the backbone of this school. Another teacher wrote in a newsletter article, "He doesn't just clean the floors, he cleanses the atmosphere. When things get chaotic, he has a way of calming everyone down." These words painted a vivid picture of a man who did far more than his job description required. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a confidant, a problem solver, and sometimes even a counselor. As Leavitt dug deeper, she discovered small but meaningful details about his personal life. Born into a modest family, he'd dropped out of school early to help support his younger siblings after their parents passed away. Education may have eluded him, but he always valued it deeply. Working at the school gave him a chance to stay connected to learning, even if indirectly. Over the years, students often sought him out, not because they needed directions to the bathroom, but because they needed someone to talk to. Whether it was a teenager struggling with grades or heartbreak, Mr. Thompson listened without judgment. And somehow, his quiet wisdom always seemed to help. One story stood out to Leavitt. A former student recalled how, during her senior year, she almost dropped out due to financial struggles at home. Mr. Thompson overheard her crying in an empty classroom late one evening. Instead of walking away, he sat down beside her and shared his own story of hardship. Then he went above and beyond, secretly collecting spare change from vending machines and pooling tips from teachers to buy her a bus pass so she could continue attending school. Years later, that student graduated top of her class and credited Mr. Thompson for changing her life. By the time Leavitt left the library, her mind was swirling with admiration and questions. How could someone give so much of themselves without expecting anything in return? Why hadn't anyone ever properly thanked him for all he'd done? It struck her then. While the school celebrated its star athletes and valedictorians, people like Mr. Thompson often faded into the background. Their contributions were quieter, less flashy, but no less important. That night, as she jotted down notes by candlelight, Leavitt realized this wasn't just a story about a janitor. It was a story about resilience, kindness, and the power of showing up every single day, even when no one is watching. Determined to shine a light on Mr. Thompson's legacy, she decided to take action. But she didn't want to stop at writing an article or making a documentary. This called for something bigger, something that would truly honor the man who had given so much of himself to others. Little did Mr. Thompson know, his quiet, unassuming life was about to become the center of attention. And little did Leavitt know, bringing his story to light would inspire not only him, but also everyone who heard it, including herself. The more Leavitt learned about Mr. Thompson, the more she felt a deep sense of responsibility to do something meaningful for him. This wasn't just about telling his story anymore. It was about showing him how much he meant to the people around him. She knew writing an article or posting online wouldn't be enough. It had to be personal. It had to come from the heart. And so, she started brainstorming ways to bring the community together in a way that would truly honor him. Her first step was reaching out to others who had crossed paths with Mr. Thompson over the years. She began by contacting former teachers and staff members whose names she'd found in the archives. One by one, she explained her idea, a surprise celebration to recognize his decades of service. To her delight, everyone was eager to help. "He deserves this," said a retired math teacher during their phone call. "I don't think he even realizes how many lives he's touched." Next, Leavitt turned to the current students and faculty. She visited classrooms, spoke at morning assemblies, and handed out flyers explaining the plan. At first, some kids were skeptical. "Why are we doing this for the janitor?" one student asked bluntly. But as Leavitt shared stories she'd uncovered, like how Mr. Thompson once stayed late to fix a broken chair so a struggling student could focus on exams instead of discomfort, the room fell silent. Slowly but surely, excitement began to build. Students started volunteering to decorate the auditorium, bake cookies, and write thank you notes. Even the principal agreed to let them use the school's resources for the event. Word spread quickly beyond the school walls. Alumni who hadn't set foot in the building for years suddenly wanted to be part of it. Some donated money to cover costs, while others offered to record video messages sharing their favorite memories of Mr. Thompson. A local bakery promised to provide a cake big enough for everyone. Social media played its part too, with posts about the upcoming celebration going viral in the small town. People who had never met Mr. Thompson personally began chiming in, inspired by his quiet dedication. But there was one detail that mattered most to Leavitt: a plaque. She envisioned something permanent, something that would remain long after the party ended. So she worked with a local artist to design a simple yet elegant plaque to hang near the school's main entrance. The inscription read, "To our beloved janitor, a lifetime of service, kindness, and inspiration." When the final design was ready, she teared up reading it. It was perfect. As the days passed, Leavitt threw herself into organizing every last detail. She coordinated schedules, arranged seating, and made sure nothing was overlooked. Yet despite her busy routine, she couldn't stop thinking about what Mr. Thompson might feel when he realized what was happening. Would he be embarrassed, overwhelmed, happy? She hoped it would be the latter. After all, this wasn't just about surprising him. It was about reminding him that his hard work hadn't gone unnoticed, that he mattered. On the eve of the big day, Leavitt found herself pacing nervously. Everything was set. The decorations were up, the food was ready, and the auditorium buzzed with anticipation. But she couldn't shake the fear that something might go wrong. What if Mr. Thompson didn't show up? Or worse, what if he felt uncomfortable being the center of attention? These doubts swirled in her mind until she reminded herself why she was doing this in the first place. This wasn't about perfection. It was about gratitude. Finally, the morning arrived. Leavitt woke up early, dressed carefully, and headed to the school. As she walked through the now familiar hallways, she noticed how different they felt today. There was an energy in the air, a sense of unity among students, teachers, and alumni alike. Everyone seemed to share the same goal, making this day unforgettable for the man who had given so much of himself without asking for anything in return. By mid-morning, the auditorium was packed. Rows of chairs filled with smiling faces stretched. From the stage to the back wall, balloons bobbed gently overhead, and banners bearing messages like, "Thank you for 47 years," hung proudly. Behind the scenes, volunteers scrambled to make final preparations. Leavitt took a deep breath, clutching the microphone she'd been handed. All that was left now was to wait for Mr. Thompson to arrive, and hope he wouldn't suspect a thing. The moment of truth finally arrived. Leavitt, along with a group of volunteers, had carefully planned how to get Mr. Thompson into the auditorium without raising suspicion. They decided to stick to his usual routine as much as possible. That morning, he entered the school just like any other day, carrying his mop bucket and wearing his well-worn work boots. His pace was slower than usual, but his demeanor remained calm and cheerful, unaware of what awaited him. A teacher who was in on the plan casually approached him as he started cleaning the main hallway. "Hey there," she said warmly. "We've got a little meeting in the auditorium today. The principal wants everyone to attend. It's nothing big, just a quick update." She added a smile for good measure, hoping to keep things light. Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow slightly, looking puzzled. Meetings weren't exactly part of his daily schedule, but he nodded politely. "All right, I'll be there," he replied, setting down his mop. As he made his way toward the auditorium, Leavitt peeked out from behind the heavy curtains on stage, her heart racing. Dozens of people were already seated, whispering excitedly among themselves. Children giggled nervously while older alumni exchanged knowing glances. The energy in the room was electric, yet somehow still warm. Everyone waited silently as Mr. Thompson stepped inside, scanning the crowd with mild confusion. When he saw the packed auditorium, his eyes widened. For a moment he froze, clearly unsure of what was happening. Then someone near the front row stood up and began clapping. Slowly, others joined in until the entire room erupted into thunderous applause. Mr. Thompson blinked rapidly, his face turning red. He looked around, searching for answers, but all he found were smiling faces and waving hands. Leavitt took this as her cue. Stepping onto the stage, she held up her hands to quiet the crowd. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke into the microphone. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "you probably didn't expect this when you walked in here today. But we wanted to take a moment to thank you for everything." She went on to explain why they had gathered, not just because of the years he'd spent working at the school, but because of the countless lives he'd touched along the way. She recounted some of the stories she'd uncovered during her research, the late-night conversations with students, the small acts of kindness that added up over decades, and the quiet sacrifices he made every single day. Each word seemed to hit its mark, judging by the tears forming in Mr. Thompson's eyes. Then came the unveiling of the plaque. 2 students carried it forward, holding it high so everyone could see. As the inscription was read aloud, the room fell silent again. This time it wasn't anticipation, it was reverence. When the words, "A lifetime of service, kindness, and inspiration," echoed through the auditorium, even the toughest-looking teenagers wiped their eyes discreetly. But the surprises didn't end there. One by one, people stood up to share their memories of Mr. Thompson. A former student talked about how he'd stayed after hours to help her study for exams when no one else believed in her. A teacher recalled how he'd fixed a leaky pipe in the middle of winter, saving the classroom from flooding. Even the principal admitted that Mr. Thompson had been the glue holding the school together during tough times. Each story painted a fuller picture of a man who gave far more than anyone realized. For Mr. Thompson, it was overwhelming. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly unused to being the center of attention. But when he finally stood up to speak, his voice was steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I don't know what to say," he admitted, pausing to collect himself. "I never thought anyone noticed the little things I did. I just tried to do my job, to make this place better, even if it was in small ways." His humility only deepened the impact of the moment. The audience erupted into applause once more, cheering loudly as if trying to convey everything words couldn't express. Someone handed him a tissue, which he accepted with a sheepish grin. It was clear that, for the first time in perhaps his entire life, Mr. Thompson felt truly seen. After the speeches, the celebration continued with music, laughter, and plenty of food. Students lined up to hug him. Teachers shook his hand warmly, and alumni shared photos they'd brought from years past. Through it all, Mr. Thompson moved slowly, soaking in every interaction. His usual reserved nature softened, replaced by a quiet joy that radiated from within. By the end of the event, the auditorium buzzed with chatter about what had just happened. People lingered, reluctant to leave, savoring the warmth of connection they'd experienced. For Leavitt, watching it unfold was both humbling and exhilarating. She realized then that this wasn't just a tribute to Mr. Thompson. It was a reminder to everyone present of the power of gratitude and recognition. Sometimes all it takes is a simple act of acknowledgement to change someone's world, and maybe your own too. As the celebration began to wind down, Leavitt found herself standing near the back of the auditorium, watching Mr. Thompson interact with the crowd. He was surrounded by people, students tugging at his sleeve to get his attention, teachers patting him on the shoulder, and alumni holding up old yearbooks for him to sign. It was a scene unlike anything she'd ever witnessed. The man who had spent decades blending into the background was now the brightest light in the room. Despite all the noise and excitement, there was an unmistakable sense of sincerity in every interaction. A young boy, no older than 10, stepped forward shyly, clutching a piece of paper. "Mr. Thompson," he said softly, "I drew this picture for you." He held out the artwork, a colorful depiction of the school building with a stick figure sweeping the steps. At the bottom, it read, "Thank you for keeping our school clean and happy." Mr. Thompson bent down to look closer, his eyes glistening. "This is beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have real talent, young man." Moments like these happened over and over again. Someone brought out an old photo album filled with candid shots of Mr. Thompson fixing desks, hanging decorations, or simply smiling in the hallway. Another person handed him a handmade card signed by dozens of current students, each message brimming with gratitude. Even those who hadn't known him personally felt compelled to express their admiration. One woman, whose children attended the school years ago, approached him hesitantly. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "My kids always came home talking about how kind you were to them. You made such a difference in their lives." For Mr. Thompson, it was overwhelming, but not in a bad way. There was a quiet dignity in how he handled everything. He listened intently to every story, nodded thoughtfully at every compliment, and accepted every gesture of appreciation with grace. Yet, beneath his composed exterior, it was clear that he was deeply moved. Every hug, every handshake, every word of thanks seemed to chip away at the layers of modesty he'd built around himself over the years. By the end of the day, he looked lighter, as though a weight he'd carried for decades had finally been lifted. Leavitt couldn't help but notice how much joy radiated from everyone involved. The students, who often took the school's cleanliness for granted, now understood the effort behind it. Teachers, who had worked alongside him for years, saw him in a new light, as more than just a janitor, but as a cornerstone of the community. And the alumni, many of whom hadn't thought about high school in years, rediscovered the value of remembering where they came from. It wasn't just about honoring Mr. Thompson. It was about reconnecting with something greater than themselves, The sun began to set, casting golden light through the auditorium windows. The event slowly came to a close. People began filing out, still chatting animatedly about what they'd experienced. But before leaving, nearly everyone stopped to give Mr. Thompson one last hug or handshake. Some promised to visit again soon. Others vowed to spread his story far and wide. By the time the room emptied, only a handful of people remained, including Leavitt. She walked over to him, feeling a mix of pride and relief. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. Mr. Thompson chuckled, running a hand through his graying hair. "To be honest, I'm not sure my heart can handle much more of this," he admitted with a grin. "But I'll tell you one thing, I've never felt so appreciated." His words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Appreciation. It was something most people craved but rarely received in such abundance. For someone like Mr. Thompson, who had given so much without expecting recognition, it must have felt like a dream come true. Before heading home, Leavitt helped tidy up the auditorium, making sure nothing was left behind. As she packed away leftover decorations and stacked chairs, she noticed Mr. Thompson lingering near the plaque that had been unveiled earlier. He stood there quietly, staring at it as if trying to memorize every detail. She approached him cautiously, not wanting to interrupt his moment of reflection. "Do you like it?" she asked softly. He turned to her, his expression softening. "Like it? I love it," he replied. "It's not every day someone makes you feel like you've mattered. This means more to me than I can put into words." His honesty struck a chord deep within her. In that moment, Leavitt realized that while the plaque was a beautiful tribute, the real gift was the collective gratitude of everyone who had shown up today. It wasn't just metal and engraving. It was proof that his life's work had touched countless hearts. As they locked up the school together, Leavitt couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger had shifted, not just for Mr. Thompson, but for the entire community. This celebration had reminded everyone of the importance of noticing the unsung heroes in their midst. It wasn't always the loudest voices or the flashiest achievements that left the greatest impact. Sometimes, it was the quiet, steady presence of someone like Mr. Thompson that truly shaped the world around them. Walking to her car, Leavitt glanced back at the school one last time. The building looked the same as it always did, but she knew it would never feel quite the same to her again. Behind those walls was a man who had dedicated his life to serving others, and now, thanks to a little effort and a lot of love, he finally knew just how much he was valued. The days following the celebration brought a noticeable change in Mr. Thompson. Though his routine remained the same, waking up early, tying his boots, and grabbing his mop, there was something different about him. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, his steps lighter, his smile broader. It wasn't just that he felt appreciated. It was as if he had been reminded of his own worth. For someone who had spent decades blending into the background, this newfound recognition was transformative. At school, students began greeting him more warmly than ever before. Instead of rushing past him in the hallways, they stopped to chat or offer a quick thank you for keeping their classrooms clean. Teachers made it a point to include him in conversations, asking his opinion on everything from new cleaning supplies to upcoming events. Even parents visiting the school noticed the shift. One mother remarked to Leavitt during a PTA meeting, "There's something special about him, isn't there? You can feel it when he walks into a room." Word of the celebration spread beyond the school community, too. Local newspapers picked up the story, highlighting Mr. Thompson's dedication and the heartfelt efforts of those who organized the event. A reporter interviewed him one afternoon, sitting beside him in the empty cafeteria after lunchtime cleanup. When asked how he felt about all the attention, Mr. Thompson shrugged humbly. "I'm just doing my job," he said. "But I'll admit, it feels good to know people care." The article, titled "The Janitor Who Became a Legend," touched readers across the town, sparking conversations about gratitude and the often overlooked contributions of everyday heroes. Inspired by the story, others began taking action in their own lives. A group of high school seniors started a gratitude wall near the entrance, where students could write notes thanking staff members for their hard work. Teachers encouraged kids to think about the people around them, the cafeteria workers, bus drivers, and maintenance crew, who kept things running smoothly behind the scenes. Slowly but surely, a culture of appreciation began to take root. For Leavitt, seeing this ripple effect reinforced why she had pursued the project in the first place. Journalism, she realized, wasn't just about telling stories. It was about creating connections. By shining a light on Mr. Thompson's life, she had not only honored him but also inspired others to reflect on their own relationships and communities. She found herself thinking more deeply about the people she encountered daily. The barista at her favorite coffee shop, the postal worker delivering mail, the neighbor sweeping leaves off the sidewalk. Were they being seen? Appreciated? One evening, as she sat at her desk writing an article about the aftermath of the event, her phone buzzed. It was a text from the school principal. Attached was a photo of Mr. Thompson standing proudly next to the plaque, surrounded by students holding signs that read, "We love our janitor." The caption simply said, "This is what joy looks like." Leavitt smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. What had started as curiosity had grown into something far greater, a reminder of the power of kindness and collective effort. Still, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held for Mr. Thompson. Would he continue working at the school indefinitely? Or would this moment of recognition encourage him to slow down and enjoy retirement? She decided to visit him again, hoping to find out. When she arrived at the school the next morning, she found him in his usual spot, polishing a row of lockers. His movements were deliberate, almost meditative. "Good morning," she called out, approaching cautiously. He looked up, his face breaking into a familiar grin. "Morning. What brings you here today?" "I wanted to check in," she said, leaning against a nearby locker. "How are you feeling after everything that happened?" He paused, setting down his rag. "You know, I've thought a lot about that," he admitted. "For years, I wondered if anyone noticed what I did, or if it even mattered. But now, well, let's just say I feel like I've earned my place here, and honestly, I don't think I'm ready to stop anytime soon." His words didn't surprise her. This was a man whose identity was tied to his work, not because he needed validation, but because he genuinely loved what he did. Cleaning wasn't just a job for him, it was a way of showing care. Every polished floor, every neatly arranged desk, every repaired chair was a testament to his belief in making the world a little better, one small act at a time. As they talked, Leavitt realized something else. Mr. Thompson wasn't the only one transformed by the experience. She had changed too. Before this project, she'd sometimes fallen into the trap of chasing big, flashy stories, the kind that grabbed headlines but lacked depth. Now she understood the beauty of focusing On the ordinary, the overlooked, the quietly extraordinary, there was immense power in telling stories that reminded people of their shared humanity. Before leaving, she thanked him once more for trusting her with his story, for inspiring so many, and most importantly, for simply being himself. As she walked away, she glanced back one last time. There he was, humming softly to himself as he worked, a man content in his purpose. In that moment, Leavitt knew she'd carry his lesson with her forever. True greatness isn't measured by fame or fortune, but by the quiet, steady impact we leave on the lives of others. Weeks turned into months, and life at the school settled back into its usual rhythm. Yet the impact of that day lingered like a gentle echo, reverberating through the hallways and classrooms. The gratitude wall grew so full of notes that it had to be expanded twice. Students began organizing small acts of kindness, bringing coffee for the office staff, leaving encouraging messages on teachers' desks, or even helping Mr. Thompson carry his cleaning supplies. It was as if the celebration had planted a seed, and now gratitude was blooming in unexpected ways. For Mr. Thompson, little things changed too. His locker cleaning routine became less solitary, with students often stopping by to chat or lend a hand. Teachers invited him to staff meetings, valuing his input on everything from classroom layouts to school events. Even parents started recognizing him by name when they visited, often pausing to thank him personally. These moments may have seemed small, but to someone who had spent decades working quietly in the background, they meant the world. Leavitt stayed, in touch, dropping by occasionally to check in. Each time she visited, she noticed how much lighter he seemed. Gone was the stooped posture and weary expression she'd first seen months ago. In their place was a man who moved with purpose, his eyes bright with contentment. One afternoon, she found him sitting on a bench outside the school, watching students play soccer during recess. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, gesturing to the empty space beside him. "Not at all," he replied, scooting over slightly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, observing the laughter and energy around them. Finally, Leavitt spoke. "Do you ever think about retiring? You've earned it more than anyone I know." Mr. Thompson chuckled softly, leaning back against the bench. "I won't lie, it's crossed my mind. But then I look at days like this," he said, nodding toward the field, "and I realize I'm not ready to give it up yet. This place and these kids, they're part of me now. And honestly, I think I still have a few good years left in me." His answer didn't surprise her. Retirement wasn't just about age. It was about finding meaning in what you did every day. For Mr. Thompson, that meaning came from being present, for the students, the teachers, the community. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a steady presence, a quiet force that held everything together. As the conversation drifted to other topics, Leavitt reflected on how much she'd learned from him. Before meeting Mr. Thompson, she'd been caught up in chasing success, writing articles that got clicks, pursuing stories that made headlines. But now she saw the value in slowing down, in noticing the people who kept the world spinning without seeking recognition. She realized that true fulfillment came not from grand achievements, but from making others feel seen and valued. That evening, as she drove home, Leavitt thought about the ripple effect of kindness. What started as a simple act of curiosity, a question asked in passing, had grown into something far greater. It wasn't just about honoring one man, it was about reminding an entire community of the importance of gratitude. People often waited for big milestones to express thanks, but why should they? Every day offered countless opportunities to acknowledge the efforts of those around us. The next morning, as she brewed her coffee, she decided to write a follow-up piece not just about Mr. Thompson, but about the lessons his story taught everyone. She titled it, "The Power of Showing Up." In it, she wrote about how ordinary actions could lead to extraordinary outcomes, how staying committed even when no one was watching could inspire others to do the same, and most importantly, how taking the time to appreciate someone could change both their lives and yours. When the article went live, it resonated deeply with readers. Comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of unsung heroes, The neighbor who shoveled snow without being asked, the co-worker who always stayed late to help, the stranger who held the door open on a busy day. Many promised to start, paying closer attention to the people around them, vowing to say thank you more often. Back at the school, Mr. Thompson continued doing what he loved best. He polished floors, fixed broken chairs, and greeted students with his signature, smile. Life went on as usual, but there was a new sense of connection, a shared understanding that everyone played a role, no matter how small. And though he never sought the spotlight again, his legacy lived on in the hearts of those he touched. For Leavitt, the experience became a turning point. She approached her work differently now, focusing on stories that celebrated humanity in its purest form. Her journey with Mr. Thompson reminded her that greatness wasn't defined by titles or accolades. It was measured by the love and care we put into everything we did. Whether it was sweeping a floor or writing an article, every action mattered. And so, the story of the janitor who worked for 47 years and the woman who helped the world see him became a testament to the power of gratitude, humility, and the extraordinary potential hidden within ordinary lives. The months rolled on, and the bond between Leavitt and Mr. Thompson grew stronger. Their conversations became less formal, more like those shared between old friends. She visited him regularly, not just to check in, but because she genuinely enjoyed his company. He had a way of seeing the world that was both simple and profound, a perspective shaped by years of quietly observing life unfold around him. On one such visit, they sat together under the shade of a large oak tree near the school playground, watching children chase each other with unbridled energy. "You know," Mr. Thompson said after a long pause, "I used to think my job didn't matter much, that no one really noticed what I did." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "But now I see it wasn't about being noticed. It was about doing something worthwhile, even if only for myself." Leavitt nodded thoughtfully. "It's funny how we often underestimate the impact of our actions," she replied. "You've taught me that it's not always about the big gestures. It's the little things done consistently over time that leave the deepest mark." He smiled at her words, clearly touched. "Well, you've taught me something too," he said. "That people are capable of kindness in ways I never imagined. If someone like you can take the time to appreciate an old janitor, then maybe there's hope for all of us." Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but she knew he was right. Kindness didn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it was as simple as paying attention. As they sat there talking, Leavitt realized how much their friendship had enriched her own life. In honoring Mr. Thompson, she had discovered a deeper sense of purpose, one rooted in gratitude and human connection. Around the same time, the school decided to take things a step further. Inspired by the celebration, the administration launched a program called Everyday Heroes. The initiative aimed to recognize staff members whose contributions might otherwise go unnoticed, from cafeteria workers to bus drivers to maintenance crews. Each month, one individual would be celebrated during a special assembly, complete with speeches, gifts, and heartfelt applause. Unsurprisingly, Mr. Thompson was named the first honoree. When the announcement was made, he initially tried to decline, insisting others deserved the recognition more. But when Leavitt gently reminded him of how much joy he'd felt during his own surprise celebration, he relented. "All right," he said with a laugh, "but don't expect me to make a speech. I'll leave that to you." The event was a huge success, drawing families, alumni, and local media. Students performed skits and songs dedicated to the honorees, while teachers shared anecdotes highlighting their dedication. For Mr. Thompson, it was another chance to feel seen, not just by the community, but also by himself. As he stood on stage, surrounded by cheers and smiles, he finally allowed himself to embrace the truth. His work mattered, deeply. Outside the school walls, the ripple effects continued to spread. People began sharing their own stories of every day. Heroes online using a hashtag inspired by the program. "Thank you for showing up." Posts flooded social media. Photos of grocery store clerks, delivery drivers, nurses, and countless others who kept the world running smoothly. Some shared heartfelt letters, while others organized small acts of kindness in their neighborhoods. What started as a local movement quickly gained momentum, touching lives far beyond the town's borders. For Leavitt, this collective response reinforced her belief in the power of storytelling. By focusing on Mr. Thompson's life, she hadn't just honored one person. She'd sparked a chain reaction of gratitude and reflection. Everywhere she looked, people were waking up to the importance of noticing those around them. Strangers struck up conversations on buses, co-workers exchanged genuine compliments, and neighbors began lending a hand without being asked. It was as if the entire community had been reminded of its shared humanity. One crisp winter morning, Leavitt received an unexpected letter in the mail. Inside was a handwritten note from Mr. Thompson, thanking her once again for everything she'd done. "You gave me more than just a plaque," he wrote. "You gave me a reason to keep going, to believe that my efforts weren't wasted, and for that, I'll always be grateful." Tears welled up in her eyes as she read the words. Gratitude, she realized, wasn't a one-way street. It flowed back and forth, enriching everyone it touched. She tucked the letter into a drawer where she kept mementos of her most meaningful projects. It was a reminder of why she did what she did, and of the incredible man who had changed her perspective forever. As the seasons changed and years passed, Mr. Thompson eventually slowed down. His mop bucket didn't accompany him everywhere anymore, and he spent more time sitting on that bench under the oak tree, observing the world with quiet satisfaction. Yet, his presence remained a constant source of inspiration for everyone who crossed his path. Even after he officially retired, the school kept his memory alive through annual celebrations and tributes. For Leavitt, the experience stayed with her throughout her career. She went on to write many more stories, but none held quite the same place in her heart as this one. It reminded her that behind every face lies a story worth telling, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest waves. In the end, it wasn't just about a janitor or a journalist. It was about the connections we forge, the lives we touch, and the legacy we leave behind. And though Mr. Thompson may have retired his mop, his spirit lived on, in the laughter of students, the gratitude of strangers, and the quiet resolve of anyone who chooses to show up every day simply because they care.